One decision cost me my first ever ASIM cut and the greatest comeback story of my entire Pokemon journey. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 16 of Road to Worlds. We just got back from Orlando, and as I'm sure most of you know, it was one of the most eventful tournaments in recent history. And if you're wondering what the title and the thumbnail are about, those of you who saw my tweet might already kind of know, but Orlando was a tournament that was full of a lot of almosts for me. Now, I'm going to start with the positives and say that we did accomplish our goal of redeeming ourselves from our EUIC performance, but there are a couple of things that I feel like I just barely missed out on, and that's what the title and the thumbnail are alluding to. Specifically, I was one game off of making my first ever ASIM cut, which is my next goal on the list. Now that I've made day 2 and I've gotten cash, my next goal is to make top cut at a major. And the third game of the last round of Swiss would have gotten me in if I played it correctly, but as the intro mentioned, I made a mistake and it cost me the entire rest of the tournament. Now, it wasn't all bad. This tournament did feature a lot of great moments. I did get to play against and defeat a lot of really good players, including Cerys Jones, Sebastian Lashmet, Justin Neudorf, a big one, and almost beat Carson Washer in my winning into ASIM. So, of course, we're going to go through at least some moments from all of those games. The Cerys matchup was a Grimmsnarl matchup, and those of you who know, those matchups get really, really complicated, so it's hard to kind of remember what happens over the board from memory. But there was one specific moment that I want to talk about that Cerys didn't agree with, but I think may have actually secured me the game. And I can happily say that out of the first 11 rounds of the tournament, I am the only person who was able to take games off of Cerys. I was surprised when she congratulated me for being the first one to take a game off of her, so naturally we had to do it again and take the whole round. Overall, I'm happy with my performance. I did end 10-3-1 like I always do. I was joking in my Birmingham video about being the 10-3-1 warrior, and I am just not beating the allegations. I have gone 10-3-1 in every single regional that I've played in. I went 8-2-4 in LAIC, and we don't talk about EUIC. Indianapolis is the next regional, the next major that I'm doing, and I really hope we can break the 10-3-1 curse there. I have no idea what deck I'm going to play, but it's probably going to end up being some variant of Dragapult. With this finish, we did manage to secure 920 championship points, so even if we were 99.9% sure we were going to get to Worlds before, I think it's safe to say we're 100% locked now. We're going to change up the format of this recap a little bit. Those of you who saw my older recaps are maybe used to kind of just hearing me talk at the venue after each round, but I figure that's a lot of talking and a lot of trying to follow along at home when you have no context of how the games went. So this time around, I'm going to kind of go round by round from home, and I'm going to refer to my notes and try to make it as brief as possible, and I'm going to pull up the board states and walk through them so you can follow along with me. And I know that the format is changing soon, and Dragapult Dusknoir might not actually be the best way to play the deck moving forward, but it's the overall themes of those moments that I think we can all carry forward no matter what deck we play. As always, let's take a look at the venue first, let's get some vibes going, and then we will jump into the analysis. Let's go. All right, let's get into the first position here. Of course, I'm doing all of this from memory and using the post-game notes from the venue, so I'm not going to be able to remember exactly what my opponent had. But in this position, I had a decision to make. I benched the Badoo, and my initial plan was to attach retreat into the Badoo and go for another Ishii-Pollen. But I was pretty sure that my opponent had a chance to get a Gardevoir out this turn. I don't know if it was through Evo or if I saw them grab it off of something, but I was pretty confident that they were going to be able to go for a Screamtail play. So if I went attach, retreat into my Badoo and went for the Itchy Pollen and they get a Gardevoir, they were going to Screamtail my Dusclops, and then I would have no way to play against their board. So I did what I like doing as Dragapult against a lot of Gardevoir boards, which is I simply attached and I passed. I'm pretty sure I had Neo in my hand at this point. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have done this, or I was confident that I would be able to get to it. But the goal of this position here was I was trying to force my opponent into making a mistake by giving my opponent a lot of targets. By keeping the energy here, now my opponent has to worry about being hit with a Phantom Dive next turn with one more energy attach. So now, even if they do get a Gardevoir, they have to make the decision of whether they take out my only energy or if they Screamtail my Dusclops. And because I don't actually play Guardy, I don't actually know what the correct answer is. I can say from the Dragapult side, if they still went for the Screamtail on my Dusclops, I would have been very uncomfortable. But by attaching this energy and leaving it here, my opponent did make a mistake. They did get into the Gardevoir, and they went for the Gardevoir knockout on my Dragapult. From there, I was able to... I can't remember if I went for the Dusknoir pop right away or if I just went for the punch into the Gardevoir. My opponent had a lot more stuff clogging up the bench. That was a big theme of this game, is my opponent was just bench locking themselves repeatedly. So because they didn't take away my Dusclops, because they just took away my energy, I was able to just go Neo, Dragapult, Phantom Dive into their board. And I'm pretty sure I saved my Dusknoir for later in the game when they went down to 2 prizes, because there was a point where I was able to come back from a 6-1 prize deficit by popping a Noir on something, Ionoing my opponent to 1, punching a Guardy, maybe taking a 2-prize knockout, and then they kind of just went draw pass for a couple turns because they didn't have Fez or Mew on board, and they got hit with an Iono to 1. So this is one thing to keep in mind. If you're not sure, the other big thing is I was down 3 energies here. I had 3 energies prized, so that's another reason why I didn't want to just dump this energy and go into Badoo, because I thought I would be way too behind in energy attaches. So moral of the story, put your opponent in uncomfortable positions. They're more likely to make a mistake, and my opponent did. Okay, let's get into the second position here. In this position, as you can see, my board state is just completely dominating. I may have even had another energy on the low here. I think I had like maybe another single energy or a Neo. And my opponent has nothing going on, but they have taken quite a few prizes because I was just Itchy Pollening them the whole game. So in this position, I actually saw that my opponent had Stamp in hand because when they were drawing cards, they actually flashed it. So I actually knew that if I take a knockout, I'm going to basically just give them a chance to get back into the game. But for some inexplicable reason, I felt the need to take a knockout here, and I actually popped my Dusknoir on my opponent's Dragapult and went for the Phantom Dive. Naturally, I got stamped, and then my opponent hit me. I can't remember if it was this game or another game, but they hit me with some sort of like Clefairy play on my Dragapult and just won the game from this position. Realistically, all I really had to do here was just punch into the Dragapult, put some damage on Combuskin, and then if they put down more Dreepies or Torchics, I just spawn camp the stage 1s, and then they just can't ever set up another attacker. I don't know why I popped the Dusknoir here, and this is something that I talk about a lot. I make jokes about other Dragapult players being scared to pop Dusknoir, but I sometimes suffer from popping it too early, and this is actually a theme that you're going to see come back in the last round of the tournament, and that's actually what cost me the whole tournament. So very important thing to keep in mind. There's no reason to take a knockout here. My opponent is doing nothing if I just punch into their Dragapult and put some damage on Combuskin and just wait it out. Okay, second position of game 2. I don't remember exactly what was on my opponent's board, but the big theme here was I was looking for a Phantom Dive this turn. I can't remember if I was going for a boss Phantom Dive or just like punching into the active and putting damage on the board, but I played some draw supporter and I had no basic energy and I was item locked, so I couldn't recover another basic energy, I'm pretty sure. And I drew into my Neo Opera energy here, and for some reason, I was still, I guess, tilted from the first game where I made a mistake, and I made the big mistake of letting my tilt affect my play later, and I made another bad play here where, for some reason, I attached Neo to my active here and went for a Phantom Dive, even though my opponent had a Monkey set up, and I really had no reason to put damage on the board. Jet Headbutt's more than enough to KO this Badoo. This Neo belonged here, so I can Phantom Dive with a different Dracloak next turn, and if they go for a Gust KO on this Dracloak, I'm 1 energy away from attacking with this one. So I just go Jet Headbutt here. I can't remember if they already played Stamp. I think this was game 2, so it may have been something different entirely. But yeah, this Neo attached to the active was really greedy and really stupid. All right, and getting into the last position here of round 2. In this position, I was down to 3 prizes actually, and if you look at the board state, it's actually not easy for me to make a play here to try to take my last 3 prizes. My plan here was to hopefully have my opponent not KO the Badoo so I can find a Luminous Energy to attach to the Monkey, move 20 to the Dracloak, find Hawlucha somehow. This was not my hand. I think I had like 2 cards in hand or something. And then go for a Hawlucha on Dracloak and Fez, and then find a Gust to KO these 2 for perfect math. Because this would have 30 on it from the Monkey, 10 from Hawlucha, so it has 60 left, and then this would have 200 left after the Hawlucha. What my opponent did was they went for the Phantom Dive into my Dragapult, and then they KO'd my Badoo, which... actually, sorry, I think they actually went for the boss on the Dracloak here and KO'd my Badoo or something. They boss KO'd something. Maybe it was a Clops or something. But in this moment, I thought that this was basically game over and that I would lose. But actually, I had 2 Dracloaks left on the board. I think it was a Dusclops or something. But they KO'd this. They KO'd my Badoo. And then instead of just putting all 6 on Badoo, leaving me with no damage, they ended up putting 20 on this Loke and 30 on this Loke. And even before they did this, I was down to 3 prizes. They Night Stretchered for a Torchic here, and they put a Torchic on the board. And if you notice, like these 2 are now perfectly within Hawlucha range. If they just don't put the Torchic down here and they don't leave damage on my board, I don't actually have a way to take 3 prizes next turn, and I think I just lose. Like I have to just punch and pray that they can't just like Gust and KO and take the rest of their prizes. I can't remember how many they went down to at that point. But as soon as I saw them put down the Torchic, they had actually Ionoed me into the Hawlucha and boss, if I remember correctly, or like Pokepad plus boss. So I was able to just promote this, and I just put down a Hawlucha. I didn't even need the Luminous for the Monkey anymore. I just put 10 and 10 here, and then I just bossed up Fez to the active and his Phantom Dive to kill these 2. So this was a big mistake. Benching the Torchic here was a really big mistake because that's what lost them the game on the spot. But also, they gave me damage to work with. So even if they didn't have the Torchic, if I found Hawlucha plus Luminous plus boss, it is 1 more piece, but that would have still given me game because now I can move 30 to this Dracloak, Hawlucha to the Fez, and then just Phantom Dive to KO these 2. So always be careful about what you put on your bench, and when you're playing Dragapult, especially if you're playing against a deck that plays Monkey Dory, be very, very careful about leaving damage on their board because they can use it against you. And I'm pretty sure actually this was turn 2 of time. So if I didn't win this turn, the best I could get was a tie if my opponent didn't win. But them benching this Torchic just gave me the win on the spot. Okay, round 3. This one, there's a very quick one. In this game, I had an Ultra Ball in hand and some fodder, and I was playing against Guardy. The exact board state doesn't matter. It's mainly the principle of prize checking. So in this board state, I knew that my Dusknoir was prized. So when I went for the Ultra Ball for another stage 2, normally against Guardy, even, it might be a little bit greedy, but I think they only had Ralts down at this point. They didn't even have a Curlia, so I thought I could get a little bit more aggressive, and I would have normally, in most circumstances, gone for a Dusclops here, just to get it ready to evolve to a Dusknoir. But because I knew my Dusknoir was prized, I actually just went for another Dracloak, which ended up giving me more draw power. Interesting. Yeah, so I just went for another Dracloak here, which gave me more draw power, and then just made the rest of the game smoother because I have 2 recons on board. Maybe the correct play is to always go for the second Dracloak here just for the draw power, but based on their board state, normally I would have gone for the Dusclops, but remember to prize check. Duskull's only 1 turn away from getting to Dusclops anyway, so there's no rush to evolve it. Just get another Dracloak. Okay, round 4 against Great Tusk Mill. Probably not a deck you're going to ever face again. I think after rotation, I don't even know if Great Tusk survives. But kind of the only themes that I was keeping in mind was, my jamming towers are absolute gold. I cannot have these in my deck because I don't need these to be milled. So I just keep them in my hand, and I just play them at opportune times to bump Battle Cage and turn off Handheld Fan so I don't have to worry about energy being moved. The big mistake I made was I did put down 2 Duskulls early, even though I knew that this deck has to play Psyduck. They can't survive without it. But I was hoping they wouldn't be able to find it under Ishipollen. But they did manage to either Sada draw into it or Explorer's Guidance draw into it. And one turn I actually whiffed the energy to Phantom Dive, so I had to just go for a desperate boss KO on the Psyduck. And somehow with like a 20 card hand, they weren't able to recover it. So after I knocked this out, they just went for a regular mill. And the next turn I was able to put down Jamming Tower, and I was able to get like a, Dusknoir down, Dusclops down, and I just went for a Dusclops pop on the Lunatone, putting 50 on it. Dusknoir pop on the Great Tusk, putting 130 on it. And then just plop down a Hawlucha to knock this out, and then just went Phantom Dive. And then just went Phantom Dive to KO this Great Tusk and this Lunatone. And because of Jamming Tower, this turn obviously I did find energy. and then they weren't able to recover because I went down to 1 prize, and then any Phantom Dive into whatever their active is just wins the game. So big thing in this matchup, just keep your jamming towers, and the sooner you can start Phantom Diving and taking prizes, the better, because it's just a race. And also, if you somehow manage to face this deck, normally you want to thin cards like Poffin out of your deck, any kind of dead cards that you're not going to use. You do not want to thin cards against Great Tusk. Let them hit it with their, their mill ability. Reduces the odds of them hitting your boss and your jamming tower. So keep all that junk in your deck. All right, getting into round 5, it was a Guardy matchup. This one I kind of just scammed my opponent. They didn't get a Guardy out the entire series, both games, so not too much to talk about. The only thing somewhat interesting I would say is like in this board state, I was going second and I knew my opponent had a Screamtail, so they could very easily just get a Psychic and slap KO this. I didn't want to have to deal with attach retreating or having to put Latias on the board, so I played an early Poffin and I actually grabbed a second Badoo. I think I did already have like a Dreepy and a Duskull down. I don't think I would have prioritized a second Badoo over a second Dreepy and Duskull, but instead of prioritizing, let's say, a third Dreepy or a second Duskull, I did put down the Badoo, going for the Pollen, expecting them to like just, knock this out because they just want to break item lock. I have a free pivot into another Badoo, and I don't have to waste an energy attach. So small thing, but small things like that do add up, especially in this matchup. All right, round 6, playing Dragapult into Joltik box. This game, or this series went to only 2 games, and I wasn't sure if my opponent was playing the Clefairy version or the Mawile version, but in the first game they did show me Mawile, so I kind of stopped playing around Clefairy and was feeling more comfortable going wide with my board. And in this position, I think my opponent was still at 4 prizes and I was at 6, but I was able to get a nice 6 prize turn in 2 turns by kind of even just going around the Iron Hands. And I saw that they were powering up Pikachu, they're going for knockout, but if you look at my board, like this is probably about as good as my board can get. So I kind of just went for the boss on the Pikachu, brought it to the active, just put 190 on it, and I spread damage in a way that I could just clean up everything next turn. I put 5 here, and I put 1 here, and I know Joltik box doesn't usually play Iono, and I made sure to prize check, made sure my Dusknoir and Hawlucha were in there, and I had ways to get them already in hand, but I also have Lokes and Fez, so it's coming next turn no matter what. My opponent, I think at this point, I also made sure to have 2 Dusclops so I can go for the Noir next turn. I'm pretty sure my opponent at this point just Prime Catcher KO'd my Dusclops here. But then, of course, you see the play already. We just, had the Dusknoir, got the Hawlucha, had the CC. What did we do? We slammed down the Hawlucha and then just put 10 on the Pikachu to KO it. And then put 10 on the Miraidon as well. So KOing the Pikachu is 2 prizes. Put 10 on the Miraidon. Just went, CC the Miraidon, pop Dusknoir to KO Mew, taking another 2 prizes, and then just Phantom Dive into the Miraidon to take the last 2. So, very simple, very typical, like 6 prize turn. I'm sure there was something I could have done by KOing Mawile and Joltik here instead or something. I don't know. We can get fancy with it, but this is kind of how the matchup goes. They take the first 2, you punch into their board, they take another 2, and then you just take 6 prizes. Typical Joltik box, but I very much enjoyed my series against James, so I thought I'd at least show this line. All right, round 7 against Cerys. This was one that I wasn't exactly sure if I made the right play. I asked her after the game. I even said, while I was doing it, like, hey, tell me after the game if this is right or wrong. But this is basically her board state, something like this, and she had just evolved into Morgrem. I didn't have a way to bump the Spikemuth, and she was kind of dead drawing. She didn't really have a lot of like energies that she was drawing into. I think this was that game. It may have been a different game. But on this turn, she went for a very smart Devo because I think in this position it's pretty clear that I'm going to Phantom Dive and or Dusknoir next turn. So she actually went for the Devo play and took these 2 off the board. And if you look at the board now, the issue that I'm having is that she's guaranteed to get a Grimmsnarl next turn because I had no way to bump this. So if she gets a Grimmsnarl and goes like boss KO my Dreepy with Neo, I'm in a lot of trouble for the rest of the game because even if I attach here, it'll take me 2 turns to get this ready to attack, and I'm not going to be able to get a Dusknoir out next turn. So it's going to be really slow. It'll give her tempo to Frostlass, and it'll just make it really difficult for me to be able to actually play the game. Neo Upper Energy is really big in the Grimmsnarl matchup because it always takes them at least 2 attacks to KO you, and those 2 attacks gives you 1 extra turn of tempo to attach to a monkey. Because let's say you have a Neo, you punch with it, they punch you back. You can attach if you have 1 other energy on a Dreepy or an energy on monkey already. You can afford to take 2 turns to power up another Dragapult. I hope I explained that well enough. But the big thing with Neo is you want to try to protect this as much as possible because it's an extra turn of tempo that you do need to attach to the monkey. So my biggest fear was that this gets boss KO'd and it's really hard for me to do anything. So I went for the play that I went for on stream. If you guys saw my stream match and if you saw my breakdown of the stream video, I did something that she didn't agree with. I re-evolved to Dusclops, popped Dusclops on the Morgrim, put 50 on it. You all know what's coming. Went for the Night Stretcher if I didn't prize both. Let's see. Yeah, went for the Night Stretcher, evolved to Dusclops again, pop on the Morgrim, take it off the board. So now I am burning both Dusclops, which is not great for me, but it guarantees that I'm not going to lose my Neo next turn. It also guarantees that if she doesn't have access to the second Morgrim, this is not going to evolve anytime soon. And I was able to evolve here. I kind of get the tempo back, and now I'm going to get to a Dragapult before she gets to a Grimmsnarl, assuming I'm not item locked and can't find it or whatever. So that was the play that I went for. She didn't agree with it. This is one of the games that I ended up winning. I can't remember if this was game 2 or game 3. I think it was game 3. But I did end up winning the series after playing 2 games. I think game 2 she completely bricked. She literally did not see a single dark energy the entire game, except for the one that she accelerated onto the board with Grimmsnarl. I think she went through like 2 or 3 Ionos, 2 or 3 Lilies, and literally could not find a single dark energy. So game 2 was very unfortunate for her, but I'm pretty sure this was game 3 when I did this, and I think that if I didn't go for this, I would have maybe just been, completely out-tempoed and wouldn't have been able to win. Again, back to the theme of the Dragapult Blaziken game, where I tend to be a little bit too aggressive popping Dusclops, but I think in this situation, you could argue either way. There's no way for me to know if she has boss or not. I do also see the argument for just having a board of, Dusclops, Duskull. I think if I had 2 Dusclops, maybe I wouldn't have done it because she can't really KO both. But because I only had the Stretcher, I was only going to really have 1 Dusclops. And then, if she KOs this, I'm not getting a Phantom Dive next turn anyway. She has an extra turn of tempo to just boss KO the Dusknoir next turn, even if I evolve it. So I just didn't want to deal with it. I just popped it, didn't think about it too hard, and it worked out. Was it correct? Probably not. Cerys is much better than me. She seems to think that it wasn't correct, so I'll defer to her. But yeah, it worked out. All right, round 9. This is probably the luckiest game that I played. This was against Sebastian Lashmet, and this is a game that I think there was a very low chance of me winning, but I did end up winning. There was actually only a 12.5% chance of me winning, to be exact. And the way that this happened was really fortunate for me, and I'll kind of show you what my play was and what I went for. I noticed here that my opponent's bench locked, and I saw that he had pitched his Turo earlier, I think with a secret box or something. And I had also bumped his End's Castle here. So I knew that it was going to be really hard for him to get anything that I put in the active out of the active. He would basically need to Palpad back in his Turo something off the board, and then either put down Petch or Resh or something to be able to actually attack with it. So in this position, I had just lost the Badoo. I think he was at like 5 or 4 prizes or something like that. And so I went for a play that I didn't know whether or not it was going to work. I was hoping, I think in the moment I actually forgot he played Palpad, but I specifically remember when he ditched his Turo earlier, I'm like, that's going to be relevant later. And then when I bumped the End's Castle as well, I'm like, this is going to be really difficult for him to move a Zoroark. So in this position, I went for a Boss's Orders onto this Zoroark with a Defiance Band because it had no energy on it, and it had a tool, so he can't air balloon it to retreat if he has another Stadium Bump. And here, I don't remember exactly what the damage on the bench was. I do remember that this already had 30 on it. And then I punched it for another 200. And I put some damage somewhere. I don't remember exactly. I think I put all 6 on Monkey just to pressure the Monkey. And I was betting that he wouldn't be able to get the Zoroark out of the active this turn. Actually, this should be a 230. So next turn, I could go Dusclops this Zoroark, Boss or Countercatcher, Phantom Dive. Sorry, this was at 250. That's actually really relevant. I think this had 50 on it already from something. I don't remember where. So I can Dusclops this, KO this, put 3 here for knockout and 3 here for knockout. And that's basically exactly what ended up happening, but it happened in a very fortunate way for me. So if you notice, he had used both trades at this point. He had not used his supporter for turn, and he had 1 trade left. And I saw him counting his deck. So I think he was trying to figure out the odds of him being able to get the Zoroark out of the deck. And then I saw him play down a Palpad So I think these two should be switched, something like this. He played the Pal Pad, and he made a critical mistake here. Instead of just putting in the Turo, he put in the Turo and the Black Belts. So now if you notice, he has 10 cards in deck. And after he used the trade, he drew some dead cards that didn't help him. And I didn't know that he plays Pokegear. And I think this was game 3 at this point. And I hadn't seen Pokegear up until this point, if I'm remembering correctly. And at this point, he slams the Pokegear. And I am terrified that he's going to get the Turo off to move the Zoroark. But wouldn't you know it, the Turo was his last card in deck. He hit the Pokegear and he hit these 7 cards, whatever they were. And Turo was the very last bottom card. So he couldn't hit the Turo, couldn't move the Zoroark. He just moved some damage to my board. I moved it back with my monkey. And next turn, I was able to do the play that I was going for, which is Dusknoir, counter catcher this Zoroark to the front, pop Clops here, bring this up to 90. I think this is bugged. Yeah, it's fine. Bring this up to 90. Phantom Dive, 3 here for knockout, 3 here for knockout, taking my last 5 prizes. So I was very lucky. I had the 12.5% chance for him to whiff this, basically. And he told me after the game that he actually miscounted. He thought that there were only 9 cards in deck after he put in these 2. And so he thought that he was guaranteed to hit the Turo. Statistically, like his odds of hitting it off of the trade for 2, he had a 90% chance of hitting it actually, because he actually traded for 2 cards as well and then Pokegeared for 7. So he was seeing 9 out of 10 cards in his deck. So I only had a 10% chance to survive, and we got lucky. We dodged the Turo, he missed it, and we were able to clean up game 3. If he hit the Turo, I was chatting with him. He was convinced that the board state would have been unlosable. I would need to go back and look at it. I don't remember how many prizes he was at and what the rest of my board looked like. His deck was very thin, obviously. 8 cards, right? 7 cards if he hit the Turo. So he would have had everything he needed in there to pretty much close out the game. So I would have had to be a little bit careful. But yeah, there's no way to know now. And, we got a little lucky, but we did end up taking the win. So I don't even know what lesson there is here. I guess for me, it's just pay attention to your opponent's bench. Pay attention to kind of what they need to be able to get off their turn. I knew punching into the Zoroark was safe because even if he somehow finds a way to hit Turo, he's never going to be able to get like Petch and Resh on the board. So he would have to Turo this specifically just to get the damage off. And then he's not hitting me with the Reshiram attack. And if he puts down Petch, then he has to hit me with Mochi. He's not hitting me with Black Belt and Turo on the same turn. So my Dragapult's not going to get one shot probably, unless he had like monkey damage to work with or something, which I think he did. But yeah, just pay attention to your opponent's bench, pay attention to what they need to actually get their optimal turn off. And if they don't have it, then don't be afraid to just, go for a play that you think has a high chance of working. Was this the correct play? I don't know. I think in the moment it was my best play because I didn't really have much else. I had just lost the Badoo. But yeah, once again, it ended up working out. All right, now for the big one. This was, if I remember correctly, as close to accurate as I can remember for the game against Justin Neudorf. And I was up 1 game at this point, and this board state, if you look at it, he had just attacked. He had just gone down to 4 prizes. I don't remember what he KO'd, but this was essentially the board state. And I had just played a draw supporter, and I really needed to hit a Neo Upper Energy and Dusknoir and punch into his Dragapult and Clops KO his Clops so he can't KO my Pult. Mainly because if I attach Neo here, you see I have no other energy on my Dracloak, so I can't Phantom Dive next turn if he goes no RKO Pult. I actually whiff it, and I specifically remember Justin saying, I don't think I can lose from this position, and I was very happy to prove him wrong. Again, I was already up a game. We had a bunch of time, so I'm like, okay, let me just play it out and see what happens. If it was actually doomed, I probably would have just scooped and gone game 3. But in this position, I was able to pull off what I consider to be the comeback of my life. Well, maybe not, but, a pretty good comeback. I did attach the Fire Energy here, and I evolved to Dusknoir, and I went for a counter catcher, and I punched his Dracloak for 70. And he had a bunch of cards in hand. I knew there was no way he was going to whiff moving this. But the big thing here is if I at least do this, he can't attach to a monkey to start moving damage back this turn. And I'm still at 5 prizes here, and I really need to figure out how I'm going to take my 5. So my prize map was basically just these 5 Pokemon on the board. I'm like, okay, I'll just KO these 5. If he doesn't evolve, that works out for me. If he does evolve, it's going to get harder, but I can still get there if I set up a bunch of Pults of my own because I don't have any other liabilities at this point. And I noticed here critically that he was down 1 Luminous already in his discard, and he had 1 on his Pult already. So even if he finds a monkey, it's not easy for him to find a Luminous to attach to it. So I went for this play, I hit his Dracloak, and my idea was I'll just punch into Dragapult and KO this. If he ever pops Clops, I'll go down to 3, and then KOing Pult plus a 1 prizer will be my 5 prizes. So I punch his Dracloak. He does put down Monkey this turn, but he doesn't find the Luminous. I think obviously he wants to move this Dracloak. I don't know if he had the Luminous or not, but he attached retreats, goes into the Pult, and he goes Boss. So he Clopses my Clops, so I take a prize. And then he goes Boss onto my Dracloak here, and I can't remember if it was this game or another game, but I think there was an energy on one of my Lokes. But yeah, he goes Boss onto my Dracloak. Remember, he Clops my Clops, so my Clops has 50 on it now. And then he just goes Phantom Dive to KO these two and leave no damage on my board. So now he goes down to 2 prizes. And my only way of surviving now is to find a way to brick him, basically, and to try to just take 4 prizes and 2 Phantom Dives. And my plan for that is, at this point I was able to draw into another energy, so I'm able to Phantom Dive with a full HP Pult. And he has no way to take both of these knockouts. I think at this point I did evolve this Loke as well, and I did have a Fez on the board, actually. I had a Fez either from the turn before or from this turn, but I had a Fez on the board because I had to draw. And I knew at this point that, if he has Halucha Boss, or if he finds the Luminous for the Monkey and plus Boss, he's just going to win by KOing the Fez anyway. So I kind of just tried to maximize my draw power. I think actually maybe this Dracloak wasn't even here. Maybe I just had the one Dracloak that he KO'd. Yes, I only had the one Dracloak. So that Dracloak wasn't even a liability, but I did have to put this Fez down to be able to draw. And so in this position, I'm like, he already wins off of Halucha Gust or Luminous Gust. So I decided to bench 2 Dreepies and basically just try to win off Boss next turn. I'm trying to just dodge Halucha plus Boss for a turn. I'm assuming he's going to retreat this and punch me with I don't know, something. Maybe he's going to find Neo and hit me with another Pult, and then I need to just win off of Boss and Halucha. So I bench these 2 Dreepies. I think I Iono him at this point. I can't remember. So let's just say I Iono him. Clearly I don't use this app enough. He has 2 cards in hand. Let's just do something like this. And one of his cards was a Hilda, so he was able to get a Phantom Dive off next turn. But what I did in this turn is he left no damage on my board, so I didn't have anything to monkey with. So I just punched for 200 into his active Pult. I KO'd the Loke to take away some of his draw power and also to take a prize. And then I put 4 on the Monkey. And the point of the 4 here is if he can't heal this is going to get knocked out by Halucha next turn. So he can't attack me with a fresh Pult with Neo and attach to Monkey at the same time. Normally, you would want to put damage on the Loke because this is easier to KO because it only has 6 left. This requires an extra piece, but he can always evolve this. So that's exactly what happened in the game. I go down to 3 prizes. He plays the Hilda. He finds the Neo, puts the Pult on it, retreats into the Pult, and punches me. And he puts 200. His Halucha, he told me after the game, was actually prized, so he wasn't able to win off his board state. And he just puts 6 on this Dreepy here. And sure enough, I was able to find the Boss Halucha. I can't remember if he Iono'd me or not, but I think I had a Loke after I took a prize. I evolved, recon into one of the pieces, and I already had the other piece in hand. So I just went Halucha. Was it Halucha? No, sorry, I didn't even need Halucha. Sorry, I just needed the Boss. I reconned into the Boss. And I just went for the Boss's orders onto this Dragapult. Monkey 30 off of this Loke onto this Monkey, and then just go for the Phantom Dive to KO these 2 for my last 3 prizes. So again, ended up getting a little bit lucky that his Halucha was prized. He also didn't have Gust. He had to play Hilda as a supporter for turn. And we ended up coming back from a position that looked pretty doomed, which even, one of the best Dragapult players in the game deemed to be unlosable. Looking at it from the surface, I'm going to, go back to the picture in the video when I talk about this part because I don't want to undo all these steps. But yeah, if you look at the board state here, it's pretty bad. There's not really, it doesn't look good for me, especially considering I whiffed the Neo and I couldn't get the Phantom Dive off this turn. But, it's just, again, Dragapult is such a complex deck. There's so much you can do by just, stretching your opponent's resources. I knew putting the Dracloak in the active meant he can't Latias retreat it, so he has to attach retreat it. Or another thing he could have done, which I was a little afraid of, was go for the Hilda and then Neo Dragapult that turn, and then just get the Phantom Dive off that turn. I was praying he didn't have it. He ended up not having it, and we played to our outs, and we ended up winning. Prize mapped correctly, tried to minimize as many liabilities as possible on the bench, and we ended up walking away with a 2-0 dub against Justin Neudorf, the World Championship finalist. That was round 10, the first round of day 2. So that was definitely a good round to wake me up in the morning. And definitely one of the more proud games that I played, even though statistically I probably should have lost. I played to my outs and I won. So thank you, Justin, for the game. Had a lot of fun. Pult Mirror is one of my favorite mirrors when both players get to play, and this was a perfect example of why. All right, round 11, a round that we lost, unfortunately. And this is one of the games where I was a little bit unsure if I went a little bit too passive or a little bit too aggressive. And the issue is, like, if you look at this board state and you look at my hand, there's one very ideal optimal play, which is to Halucha the Zorua on the bench and just punch into the Zoroark, because it's not easy for my opponent to get into an attack this turn. I don't remember how many cards they had in hand, but I'm going to hit them with an Iono here anyway. This is after I used, I'm pretty sure this is after I used both recons. So this was basically my hand and the best that I'm going to get for the turn. So my conundrum here, I'm at 5 prizes, they're at 4. My conundrum is, if I don't hit Halucha off of the Iono, it's really hard for me to punch into the active, because now they're going to have 2 Zoroarks in play, and they are going to have damage on the active. So they still always have the option to resh my active, which I'm not really that afraid of, because I do have another Dracloak ready to turn into a Pult at any time. But if I can KO this Zorua while doing that, then my opponent is in a terrible spot, because they have no more draw power. They have the 1 Zoroark and that's it. So my issue here, he had just gone Flame Body, KO my Duskull and Dusclops on the bench. That's why he has no energy on the board. Gone down to 4 prizes. And I was at 5. So I was thinking about my prize map. And I kind of, from this board state, I have 3 options. The best option is to do what I said, which is to punch Zoroark and KO Zorua. Second option is to countercatcher the Pecharunt and ideally KO Pecharunt plus Zorua. That way at least I'm not leaving any damage on the board for my opponent to resh me. And I'm also taking 2 prizes and, you know, moving towards a 6 prize win state. And then the third option, for the second option, if I get the Halucha off the Iono as well, it's even better, because I'm taking 3 prizes and leaving them with just 1 Zoroark. The best option is to just punch into the Zoroark and KO the Zorua, because now I'm threatening to KO their only attacker. The problem was I wasn't convinced that I was going to get the Halucha off the Iono, and actually I didn't. Like, I did play the Iono, and the only card I got was Fez. I didn't play the Fez that turn, so I'll never know if I would have gotten the Halucha off of that. But the play that I went for was I actually went for the countercatcher on the Zorua, because I just wanted to make sure that he only has 1 Zoroark next turn. And this way he also, I'm not giving him enough damage on the Zoroark to rush me next turn. So I played the Iono. I just had Fez and a bunch of dead cards like Poffins and other supporters. KO the Zorua, go down to 4 prizes, put all 6 on Zoroark. But now if you look at the prize map, it's like 4-4, and I didn't really have a way to take my last 4 prizes easily. Like, sure, I can KO the Pecharunt. Even if this has 60 on it, they can just put a Monkey Dory down, heal some damage off of it, and it's not easy for me to take 2 2-prize knockouts. And my opponent did end up eventually winning this game. So the biggest learning experience there is, like, maybe not to be afraid to kind of go a little bit more aggressive, and maybe just, like, you know, sometimes just you have to go for it. Like, maybe I should have just gone for the Iono, and if I whiff the Halucha, I just put down the Fez and just say, you know, let's just try it and see what happens. At the very least, I think if I'm not doing that, then I should have at least KO'd the Pech, because then they do have to recover that if they want to hit me with the Mochi to one-shot my Pult. This was a disappointing series in general, because if I won game 1, I maybe would have won the whole series, because game 2 ended up winning. I don't know if that's just because I went second, but game 3 was really, really tragic, and I'm actually just going to show you right now what happened. It's just one of those things that you can't really do much. My first turn going first, I literally went Duskull, attach, pass. And my opponent had a Zorua in the active on the start of their turn. And as soon as they saw me pass, they got super excited and they slammed the secret box right away. So I'm like, here it comes. I'm going to get Binding Mochi, Pecharunt, you know, whatever, Poison, Donked, because Duskull's weak to Dark. So I'm getting one shot by a Mochi Zorua. The lucky thing for me is my opponent actually prized the Pecharunt. So at this point, we had 7 minutes in the round, and they prized the Pecharunt. They didn't get into an attack, so they ended up just going for a Badoo, and they went for the Itchy Pollen. And I ripped the Lily's Determination, and wouldn't you know it, I drew into 0 basics. The only card I had in hand that I could actually use to get basics was Poffin. But because my opponent was smart and went for the Itchy Pollen, I couldn't play the Poffin. And then next turn, they were able to just find... I think they even had the air balloon for the they retreated the Dark off of the off of the Zorua, and then they used the PP up to attach it that same turn before I item locked them. And then next turn they just had everything. They had the Zoroark, they had the Zekrom, they had the Dark Energy, retreat, GG, shake my hand. So, you know, it's just one of those games where like you get really unlucky, and then you get really lucky, and then you get even more unlucky. That's Pokemon for you. If I just played better game one, you know, I don't know who would have won game two. Maybe they would have won because they get to go second. You never know. But either way, the point is I needed to play better game one to hopefully try to even avoid this position in the first place. All right, round 12, the only tie that we got in this tournament. This is kind of like the only interesting board state. Well, that's not true. There were many, but it's Dragapult, and you know we can never remember Dragapult games. But this was one that I was able to actually remember, where this was after I hit my opponent with an Iono. And in this position, you can see like there's absolutely nothing happening. I think I even had a Latias down at this point. But the thing is, here we were already in turns in time, and the issue here is my opponent can never just like take a knockout on my Badoo, because then they give me Fez and they give me Counter Catcher. I mean, Counter Catcher doesn't matter, but they give me Fez. That's the big thing. And if you notice, my opponent's Grim is already, you know, severely injured. This gets knocked out by Blood Moon. My opponent does not want to give me Blood Moon. So we're basically playing a game of draw pass until, you know, somebody gets what they need. I didn't have a Dracloak, obviously. I had some dead card. So my opponent doesn't want to KO my Badoo. I'm just constantly itchy pollinating, or I don't even remember if I had a Badoo or if it was just like a regular Dreepy or something. I don't even think it was a Badoo. I think it was just like something, and I was just going draw pass. And my opponent was moving damage slowly but surely to my Fez. I was just moving it back with Monkey, and we were both just in top deck mode. My opponent wins the second they get boss's orders, because they just go boss on my Fez or Latias or whatever, and then just KO it with Grim. And I win the moment I get Blood Moon, because I can just retreat into Blood Moon and KO the Grim. Actually, sorry, I needed Blood Moon Energy. I needed those two. So we're in time at this point. We had, you know, agreed to a gentleman's, but we kind of, in this board state, like, we're in top deck mode. Like, neither one of us knows what we're going to hit. And I think that we were both just kind of like, yeah, there's no way to actually know. So we agreed to a tie. After the tie, we kind of were like going through cards. And I still think for the next like 4 or 5 turns, we both had nothing. So it would have just been like draw pass for like 4 or 5 turns. If they hit boss before I hit Blood Moon Energy, they win. Statistically, that's more likely. I don't know if they had like 1 or 2 left in deck. But yeah, it was a gentleman's that we ended up, upholding, and we ended up with a tie of this round. All right, round 13, a Pulp Mirror. This was the first game. It's not super interesting, but it kind of does show the principle of being disciplined. In this board state, you'll notice that I'm ready to attack. Like, I can just go Dragapult, boss this Dreepy, KO these 2 Dreepies, and, you know, I'm taking all their energy off the board, including their Neo, which puts me in a really good position. But if you also notice, it's my turn, and look at the damage on the board. Like, I'm winning this Badoo war. My opponent's never going to win this Badoo war before I KO their Badoo. So I decided to just hold off for a turn and just Monkey 10 to the Badoo and then just KO it with Itchy Pollen. And then next turn, they finally managed to get a Dracloak down. They had been whiffing, I think, for 2 turns. So now that they finally managed to get a Dracloak down, now it's much more high value for me to actually go after this. So the turn after, I went for the Dragapult boss and just KO'd the Dracloak and the Dreepy, still taking all the damage off their board. But now I don't have to worry about getting Itchy Pollen installed. I think by this point I got another energy on this Dreepy as well, and this was also a Dracloak, so I wanted to just make sure I had a chance to stabilize my board before I go too aggressive and give my opponent an out to this game. Okay, game 2 of the same round, I had a bit of an interesting situation. This was I don't even know if this is really a learning experience, but it also kind of is to like pay attention to the board. In this position, my opponent got a Dracloak and they evolved their Dreepy, but I didn't notice, and my opponent didn't notice, that when they were evolving, they actually took the 10 damage off of the Dreepy, obviously to evolve the Dracloak, but they forgot to put it back on. So I forgot that this 10 damage was here. So the reason why this was relevant, I think this also had 10 damage on it. So they went for the Itchy Pollen on my Badoo here, and the reason why this was relevant is because I went for the Recon Directive, and I had the choice between a Dreepy and a boss. Now, those of you who know me already know what I'm thinking, and it's the wrong play. But if I had seen that this was the damage, that this damage counter was here, what I could have done incorrectly is I could have grabbed the boss's orders, played the boss, pulled this Dracloak to the active, monkeyed 10 to their Dracloak, and taken a knockout with my Dracloak. Just attach here and go for the Dragon Headbutt. Again, don't do this. That is not correct. So it's kind of a blessing that I didn't realize that that damage counter was there, so I didn't make that stupid play. I did end up picking up the Dreepy and attaching the fire here and just continuing to try to build up my board slowly with Recon. But yeah, the learning experience there is make sure the board state is correct. It is both players' responsibility to make sure that it is correct. And then later in the same game, we had a board state kind of similar to this. As you can see, I'm about to win the Badoo War, but what I didn't know in this game, because I hadn't been able to deck search the whole game, I actually had 2 Dragapults and a Dusknoir prized. So I was wondering why I was, only playing with 1 Dracloak the entire game, not finding a Dragapult, not finding another Dracloak. I kept reconning just into energies and items that I couldn't play. So I win the Badoo War here, and I do Monkey 10 to their Badoo and, knock it out. I don't draw a Dragapult off my prizes here. And my opponent pushes the Dragapult. So in this position, I'm assuming that they're getting ready to Phantom Dive. But they end up having another Badoo, and they just go attach, retreat, and energy. I can't remember which one. They just attach, retreat into the Badoo, and they go back into Ichi-Pollinating me. So now I have 10 on it again. So in this position, I'm feeling a lot of pressure because I still haven't seen a Dragapult for like 5 turns. And I can't play items, and my opponent, I'm assuming, is getting ready to just wipe my whole board. So I go for a play just to buy a little bit of time. I do get a boss off of the Recon, and I actually end up bossing up my opponent's Dracloak here, just praying that I can buy a turn of no item lock, or at least buy myself a turn of no Phantom Dive, because they can't attach to Dracloak and to Dragapult, and if they play Turo, they can't Turo and boss in the same turn. So this actually ends up working out, and my opponent does whiff the energy. They put down the monkey at this point, I'm pretty sure, but they don't have the energy, so they just go pass. And I'm able to Ultra Ball for my 1 Dragapult on this turn, and I do evolve it just to protect the energy. I think I also had a Pokepad, so I was able to get like another Loke. Like I was able to just, set up like an actual stable board at this point. But instead of going for a Phantom Dive here and just start attacking, I think I didn't feel comfortable attacking yet, so I wanted to just stabilize my board. I think I just attached an energy somewhere. Yeah, I don't know. So I think I did something just to stabilize my board, and I just went for another Ichi-Pollen. And this turn, my opponent did not opt to retreat the Dracloak and go back into an Ichi-Pollen. They attached a Luminous to their monkey instead, leaving their Dracloak in the active. And I don't know if that's correct or not. I mean, it seems reasonable because this Dracloak is not really... Retreating is not doing anything here because I already have a Pulse, so like going to Badoo doesn't do much, especially if I have a boss. So I don't hate this attach. But what I was able to do here is I was able to just retreat into my Dragapult. I found another energy. My board is stable. So now I can start Phantom Diving. And I just popped the Clops. I think I got this one up to a Clops as well by this point. So it's ready to become a Noir. And I just popped the Clops on the monkey, and I KO'd the Dracloak plus the Monkey Dory. So now they need the energy to Phantom Dive. They also need to establish the rest of their board. And I have a Monkey Luminous advantage on them, which is then going to lead to me just winning the rest of the game, which is exactly what happened. I think at one point they tried to Iono me, and their board was something like they had a Fez on the board and their Badoo was still on the board, and they Ionoed me into Boss Halucha, and I was able to just go, drop Halucha to put 10 on the Fez, and then just boss to KO these 2 for my last 3 prizes. Because I took 1 from the Badoo, 2 from the Dracloak Monkey, and then, last 3 with these 2. So... yeah, I don't know what the learning there is. I think the main thing is just if you need to buy time, it's not the worst thing in the world to boss Dracloak. And the reason why I went for the Dracloak specifically is you have to keep Latias in mind. If I had pulled up the Dreepy instead, yes, the damage is relevant because this can then get knocked out by Phantom Dive, but if they just slam Latias, they can just free retreat into a Badoo, and then your boss is wasted. Getting your Dracloak trapped is actually really annoying. You actually saw me do that against Justin Neudorf as well. So that's why I sometimes try to make sure all my Dracloaks have at least 1 energy so I can retreat if I need to. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for, the generational fumble of a lifetime. This is the play that cost me the Orlando Regional Championship. So if you look at this board state here, this is game 3 of round 14 of Swiss. This is the moment when I could have really shown my mastery of the deck and especially of the mirror, but you'll see that very quickly I forgot to plan out certain very specific, important concepts, and it cost me the game. So at this point, it's my opponent's turn, Carson. He goes for the Ichi-Pollen on my Badoo here. He takes the knockout. He gets a prize, goes down to 5. And now, if you look at this board state, I didn't have boss in hand. I think I had maybe Lilies or something. Maybe I had another Dracloak. But I have 3 Luminous energies prized. And I had no energy in my discard, so I wasn't confident that I could draw into something, or I could, Night Stretcher back a Psychic or something. So this moment here is probably the most critical decision-making moment of the game, which is what I'm going to promote. And if you look at the prizes, it's 6-5. Now, look at what's on the board right now. My opponent has 5 prizes on the board. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 4 prizes on the board, but one of them is going to turn into a Dragapult for sure. That's going to be 5. I can evolve another one into a Dragapult to force my opponent to take 6 prizes to win. So that's already a concept that you want to try to exploit as much as possible. It's something that old Charizard decks used to do a really good job of exploiting, is forcing your opponent to take 7 prizes to win, or maybe even 8 prizes, depending on what you're playing. So my thought process here was, I don't know if I can attack next turn if I push this Loke, go for a Phantom Dive, and they KO this Dragapult. Because they have a Dusclops on the board, they can easily go Dusknoir, Phantom Dive, KO. And now I need to find one of my 2 Psychic Energies to attack next turn. I also don't have Boss, so I also can't, follow the main principle that you really want to follow, which is to punch into the Pult first. I did have Dusknoir guaranteed this turn, so if I had Boss, this is a very easy promotion. I just push the Neo, and I just go, Dusknoir, Dragapult, KO their only Dragapult. They don't even have another Dreepy on board. So my fear here is I don't have Luminous Energies, and if I can't find a Psychic, then attacking here is actually premature. So I make a suboptimal play here, and I push the Dracloak with Fire. And my thought process here is I'm going to attack with Badoo this turn, because I can KO this with Itchy Pollen, and I can actually Noir my opponent's Clops, so they can't threaten a Noir on me next turn. And if they don't find the second Dusclops under Itchy Pollen, this is going to just be fodder next turn, because I'm just going to punch into the Dragapult and take this all out on the bench. So I make the mistake of putting down another liability, which then gives my opponent a free prize to fix their prize map. Now they no longer have to take 7 prizes to win. Now, I do go for the Dusknoir here, which again, this is the big mistake. So the pushing this is already mistake number 1. Benching this is mistake number 2. And now, in light of this play, popping Dusknoir here is mistake number 3. Because now I have no threat on their only Dragapult. So I pop the Dusknoir. I take away the threat of both Clops from both players. We both take 1 prize. I do grab my first Luminous Energy off of this. And now I want to still have my Dragapult ready to attack next turn. So I use all my recons. I think I even evolved this up. I evolve here, and I decide to retreat and go attach this here to get this ready to attack next turn, and go for the Itchy Pollen, expecting him to not be able to get another Dusclops. We go down to 4 prizes. My opponent, of course, pushes this Dragapult, and he gets the optimal ideal turn. He's able to get the Dusclops down. He goes for the boss's orders on my Dragapult and gets the first punch into the Dragapult, which is really bad for me, because whoever punches into the other Pult usually wins in the mirror. Now, at this point, I think he still either didn't have a basic down, or I think at this point he put down the Latias, or I think he did that next turn. But my issue is now I have so much damage on my board, and he only needs to take 3 prizes to win. And this Badoo being here is actually really bad for me, because I can't KO this Dusclops without gusting it and punching it. But if I'm wasting damage into his Dusclops, I'm not punching his Pult, and this one Pult is going to solo my entire board. So I have to punch into the Dragapult this turn. So the only way I can survive not giving my opponent 4 prizes is to evolve up both of these Dracloaks, which is hard enough to do already, but is also really bad because then I'm taking all of my draw power off the board. My problem was one of my Dragapults was also prized. So I can no longer take this Dragapult and evolve up my board. So now this Badoo ends up being just a permanent liability that's going to lose me the game. So in this position, I'm trying to just figure out how to survive. I'm trying to remember exactly how the damage back and forth happened. I think if I remember correctly, I just went for I did get another energy, and I did manage to evolve up to this Dragapult. And I just retreat off the Neo because that's one more piece that he needs. He now needs to find Gust as well. And I go for the Phantom Dive. And I put 200 here, and I put 60 here. And actually, I think before he attacked, he actually found the Neo, and he attached the Neo to his Clops, I guess because he's going for the Shadowbind next turn. And here, he makes a smart play. He knows this Dusclops is going to get KO'd anyway, so he pops the Clops to KO my Badoo to take a prize, just getting that liability off the board permanently. We both take a prize. I still don't think I hit a Luminous here or my Pult. And then he goes for the Phantom Dive into this Pult. He puts down the Latias as well here, I think. just so he doesn't get donked, I guess, which is obviously valid. And then he punches into my Pult and takes off my Dracloak. So now I have no draw power on board, and I have 2 Pults that are going to get KO'd, and he's down to 2 prizes. So now if you look at this board, it's doomed. The only way I can survive here is I need to find Blood Moon, Energy, Iono, and knock out this Pult. And pray that I don't give him like Blood Moon Boss off of the Iono, or like, Fez into something else. I don't find the Iono because obviously I had no draw power. I think I did manage to find the Fez this turn, and I Fez for 3. Still drew no Ionos. And I have no choice here. I have to just punch. He has I think at this point 8 cards in hand. He has so many outs to Blood Moon. It would be illegal for him to not have Blood Moon. So I go for the Phantom Dive, KO the Pult, take my last 2 prizes. There has to be an easier way to do this. Take my last 2 prizes, go down to 1, which means now his Blood Moon can attack for free. He promotes the Latias. Top decks Blood Moon. His hand was completely dead, and he had no way to draw into the Blood Moon, even with that many cards. But he still had, Lilies in deck. He had Ultra Balls. He had Fez still. He could have found ways to find the Blood Moon. But poetically, he top decks the Blood Moon, retreats into it, punches into my Pult, takes his last 2 prizes, and eliminates me from the Orlando Regional Championship. And all of this started because of the turn where I didn't prize map properly, and I didn't think through what my play actually should be, what the prizes on the board look like, and how I'm actually going to take all 6 of my prizes. So I'm going to go back to that position, and I'm going to show you what I think the correct play was. Okay, so we're back in the board state where he just took his first prize with the Itchy Pollen. The correct play here, even though this feels really, really bad, is actually to Phantom Dive into the Badoo. And I'll show you why. So the correct play is to push the Loke with Neo, because we are going to be attacking this turn. Draw for turn, whatever you draw, it doesn't matter. Evolve, do your recons, whatever. Evolve here, and we go for the Phantom Dive to knock out these 2. Now let me explain why. If we KO these 2, remember, my opponent has 5 prizes on the board. We have to take 6. Which means if they don't bench something else, we can actually win the game by only taking 5 prizes. That's actually a good thing. It's the opposite of the 7 prize principle. So we take the 2 here. I think at this point I would have taken a Luminous. Now, if you look at my board is terrifying because I still have Dusknoir and I still have a Dracloak with a Fire Energy. Carson doesn't know that I have 3 Luminous energies prized. And I don't need to play in a way that gives that information away. So if he goes for the Dusknoir Phantom Dive combo, let's say he goes for the Dusknoir, he pops Dusknoir here, I go down to 3 prizes, he punches into my Dragapult and leaves some damage on my board. I can just, now my odds of actually having another Phantom Dive are really high because I'm taking another prize from him popping the Dusknoir. So it's not unreasonable for me to be able to find Dragapult and another energy. So let's actually just play it out to show how it looks. So he would pop the Dusknoir, I would take a prize, he would KO this Dragapult, probably do 30-30, and take 2 prizes. Now in this board state, it's not unreasonable for me to get another Dragapult out, and he has to bench a Dreepy here. He has to bench something here to be able to survive, because otherwise I'm just going to Dusknoir Phantom Dive KO this. So let's say he benches, realistically he's probably going to bench Blood Moon to be able to return KO or something. I can go for a Phantom Dive here, and I don't even have to pop my Noir. Because if he goes for a Gust, KO my Noir plus Dracloak, he's taking 2 prizes, but now I have a full health Dragapult, and this has damage on it. So I can just punch into this and put 60 here. He's not attacking me with Blood Moon, and eventually I'm going to wipe his board. He's going to have to give me something at some point. And he's just not going to be able to get through a Dragapult. He can never bench another Duskull. If he ever benches a Dreepy, I just went off like Halucha. So now I get into the position where my Dragapult is soloing his board. Let's say we go for Phantom Dive. We put 200 here into their Fresh Pult and 60 on the Blood Moon. And now it's really hard for them to actually be able to find a play. Because if they Gust KO my Dusknoir and Dracloak, I'm just going to punch into this Dragapult, and they're not going to be able to one-shot my Dragapult, and I'm going to be down to 1 prize. I'm going to KO anything they put on the board. If they punch into my Pult and KO Loke, then I just pop Noir on active and just KO the Blood Moon when they push it up. And I don't know what else they can do. Like, that's pretty much their only play. Like, they can't retreat into Blood Moon and punch me because I'm still at 3 prizes. So they have to punch something with Dragapult, or they just pass, and then I can just go for a pop and just wipe their board. So no matter what they put down, if they don't put down Blood Moon, let's say they put down a Dreepy or something instead, they put down a Monkey, try to move damage off, it's just not going to be enough because they just don't have the tempo, because I got the first punch into their Dragapult, and they don't have enough of a board setup to be able to attack me with something else. I spent a little bit of time thinking about this, and I'm sure even after I post this video, I'm going to find new lines or like better ways to do this. But as of right now, the line that I've found is ideally we can actually go for a counter catcher play, and we can just punch into the Blood Moon, because if we punch into the Blood Moon, sorry, not counter catcher, boss's orders. If we can punch into this Blood Moon, now our opponent can't attack with the Blood Moon, and they have to find Latias to be able to move this. Most Dragapults now don't play Turo, so I wasn't playing around Turo for most of the game, especially because I didn't see it in Game 1 or Game 2. But now if the opponent drops Latias on the board to retreat the Blood Moon, if at any point they punch into our Pult, they can't punch into our Pult actually, because then we can just go like Dusknoir active, KO this and the Blood Moon. So they would basically have to just KO the Dusknoir plus Dracloak, but then we end up in the same position as before where we can just punch into the Dragapult, put some damage on the board, and then we're going to win by taking, like, we can go 5-1, and then we can KO like any of these two prizers, no matter how they retreat it, no matter how they set up their board. We're going to take 4 prizes by KOing 2 of these. And if they punch into our Pult, they're just not KOing Dusknoir. We can just Dusknoir active, Phantom Dive KO the Dragapult and the Blood Moon. So the opponent having to bench another liability is actually something that works out for us really well, because it allows us to manipulate where we're putting the damage without taking knockouts. So as long as I still have this threat of the Dusknoir, he can't really do anything for the rest of the game. And that's assuming he even pops that Clops to KO my Dragapult to begin with. So let me go back and see what happens if he doesn't pop the Clops. So now let's say we're back in his board state, and he decides that he wants to keep the threat of Dusknoir, or, for whatever reason, he just doesn't want to pop it. In this position, like, it's just way too slow for him. Like, he could maybe try to hold it, or he can maybe try to pop it on my Noir and then just punch into my active and KO my Noir. But again, we get back to the issue before, where the second he benches something else, I'm just going to have more Dragapults than he does, and he's just not going to be able to go through all of them. So I'll just show, just for the interest of time, I'll show one more line. Let's say he just doesn't pop the Dusknoir. Let's just say he puts 200 here, and he goes 30-30. This is going to be way too slow, because I can just set up another Dragapult here. I can even just go, pop Dusknoir on his Dusknoir, and then Phantom Dive into the active and KO the Noir. And if you put like another Dreepy down or something, I'll just put 30 on the Dreepy, and then I'll just KO this Dragapult and the Dreepy to take my last 3 prizes. So the biggest thing is, like, I have multiple Dragapults set up, or the threat of multiple Dragapults. So I'm not really worried if he managed to go through 1, because he still has to take 5 prizes. The only thing he's KO'd is Badoo. And because I'm not putting liabilities on the board, he's going to have to eventually get 7 prizes to be able to win the game. Now, all of this is assuming that I'm able to find everything I need. There are still so many variables in the game, and, it's Dragapult. If you've played Dragapult, you know that sometimes you just don't have it. So if we're in a situation where, let's say, he does pop the Dusknoir, it is not unreasonable for me to get another Dragapult, but it's also not, crazy reasonable for me to get it. Because let's say, for example, he pops a Noir, I get the Luminous, he pops a Noir, and then he Ionos me to 3. So let's say I shuffle hand to the bottom here, I draw 3. I have the Dragapult, but I don't have an energy. He spreads 3-3, maybe you put something else on the board. I push up Dracloak, let's say I draw for turn. Oh, look, I got the energy. But just as easily, he just Iono 2 Luminuses to the bottom. I have 2 Psychics left in deck to draw into, and at this point I have no basics in the discard, so Night Stretcher is not an out to an energy either. But if I don't get the energy here, what is my play realistically? At this point he would be down to 3 prizes, I would be down to 3 prizes. I'm struggling to think of what my best play would be. If he has something on the bench, maybe my best play is to just go for something like Prey that I can go Dragapult, and if I have a counter catcher, I can go like Dusknoir the active, and then counter catcher Jet Headbutt like a Dreepy on the bench or something, go down to 2, and then he still has to take 3 prizes, and then this has 30 damage on it. I can KO this with Blood Moon or with a Phantom Dive next turn. I don't want to go into all the lines just because we're going to be here all night, but, the biggest thing is, like, I have multiple Dragapults set up, or the threat of multiple Dragapults. So if we're in a situation where, let's say, he does pop the Dusknoir, this is kind of like, I was initially upset that I prized 3 Luminous, and then later I realized like it's not that big of a deal. I could have played around it, but the more I look at the lines, the more I realize like it is a big deal, mainly because by the time I do take the Luminous, he could very easily just Iono them to the bottom, and then I'm in the same situation where I have to find the Psychics to be able to attack. So it's really not clear. One thing is clear: the absolute worst thing I could have done was put a Badu on the bench just to give him a free prize for only 30 damage. And that's basically what lost me the game. And having to retreat off the fire just to, not have that extra resource and feeling pressure to Dusknoir his Dusknoir. All of that is what ended up losing me the game. If I just promoted the Dracloak with Neo, even if everything else doesn't work out perfectly, it at least complicates the position enough to the point where either player can make a mistake. The board state that I was in, I definitely should not have promoted the Dracloak that I did, but I would argue that that board state was also complicated enough. But, if both of us still have Dusknoir on the board, both of us still have a Dragapult ready, there's infinite possibilities that can happen depending on what we draw, what we take off prizes. If he can find something else to bench that's not just going to get spawn camped by Halucha, there's a million ways it could have gone. So the biggest thing is we learn from the mistake, which is don't feel pressure to pop the Dusknoir, and be really careful of what you're putting on the board, because if it messes up your prize map, you're going to lose the game. All right, that took a lot longer to record than I thought it would, and man, I think it's been a total of 3 hours since I started going over these board states, and a lot of the time did go into that last game, just to try to see all the different lines and see what I could have done better. Just goes to show why the Dragapult Dusknoir mirror is as interesting as it is, and if both players get to play, it really does come down to the skill difference. So, I love skill expressive decks like Dragapult. I'm definitely going to keep playing it going into the new format. Let me know what you think about this format of tournament recap. I might do something similar for Indy, and I hope you were able to follow along. And if you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments and I will address them as soon as I can. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching. Once again, we are locked for Worlds, so I will definitely continue this series until then, and we will see where this road leads from there. See you in the next one.